If you ask a map, our street is called Maple Crescent, a gentle loop sewn into a town that prides itself on award-winning azaleas and bylaws thicker than the town budget. If you ask me, it's a halo that pretends not to be a noose. I should introduce myself. I'm Evelyn Hart, and I'm dead. That's not the most interesting thing about me, but it's what makes the rest easier to hear. People confide in the dead the way they never do with the living. Perhaps because we can't interrupt. Perhaps because we already know how each confession ends. On the last Sunday of June, the Crescent hummed with the comfort of rituals. Sprinklers ticking like polite applause. Grills sighing under ambitious marinades. A chorus of ice makers doing their civic duty. At number 12, Claire Bennett balanced a tray of lemon bars and a custody calendar, which, like every custody calendar, looked tidy until the month began. Once an attorney who never lost, she now negotiated with a child who couldn't be bought. Time. The divorce had made her efficient, which is another word for lonely. At number 18, Dr. Noor Al-Karim returned from a double shift in the with the exact posture of someone who has spoken to 6 people who thought they were dying and one who actually was. She placed her scrubs in the washer, her pager on the counter, and her worry about her daughter Layla in the space above her heart where good mothers store weather reports. At number 9, Marcela Vega arranged hydrangeas by height. She sold houses the way illusionists sell miracles, with the confidence of a person who knows where the trapdoor is. Her husband, Tomas, traveled endlessly for operations, which is what men say when their professions can't be explained at dinner without ruining dessert. Marcella liked crisp lines, early offers, and a street that minded its edges. At number 1, the corner lot, June Whitaker ruled from a porch that had once won Best Seasonal Garland. She had 2 adult sons she spoke to often and a husband she visited daily at Maple Pines Memory Care, where she reintroduced herself with grace. June collected recipes, favors, and the sort of secrets that gather around listening ears like moths to lamplight. And at number 6, Theo Park pulled croissants from an oven he bought used from a bakery that believed in second chances. Theo was Maple Crescent's widower, a title as heavy as it sounds, but he kneaded grief into pastry and handed out mercy with paper napkins. All of them, Claire, Noor, Marcella, June, Theo, were bass notes in the perfume of our street. But the top note that day was President Addison Cole, who wore white like an alibi and believed a hedge should be trimmed to within an inch of its self-respect. The block party began precisely at 4. Fold-out tables bloomed, speeches were inflicted, and then, like a magician palming a coin, a courier slipped 5 envelopes into 5 mail slots and was gone. Blue envelopes. No return address. Flaps sealed with a wafer stamped J. Claire opened hers in the kitchen, between the lemon bars and the custody calendar. Inside, a single sentence. I know what you buried. Noor opened hers on the staircase and sat down so quickly she startled the cat. Marcella opened hers in a room staged to look like no one truly lived there. A vase toppled and didn't dare break. June opened hers on the porch and folded it twice before letting it hover above her teacup like an omen. Theo didn't open his. He recognized the handwriting. By dusk, the street smelled like charcoal and questions. Children chalked hopscotch courts across the cul-de-sac. Teens practiced indifference, adults practiced sincerity. Claire found Noor near the buffet. You got 1, Claire said, which was not a question. I got 1, Noor replied, which was not an answer. They held each other's gazes as if eye contact were a password. Claire lowered her voice. 2012, I was hoping it had chosen a different year, Nor said. Marcella arrived with a smile polished to within an inch of its surface. We are not doing this here. June joined them without being invited, which is a talent earned by outliving gossip. We are absolutely doing this here. Because someone already is. What do you think it is? Nor asked. A test, June said. Of how quickly we forget. From my vantage, draped across the maple's highest whisper, where sparrows told better jokes than most humans, I watched 4 women triangulate around a memory they had promised not to name. Addison watched them too, the way a lifeguard watches a riptide, pleased to be necessary. Night arrived like permission. The party dwindled to paper plates and political opinions. And at 10:37 p.m., a water main under the fourways cracked open its old throat and flooded the intersection with muddy truth. Children squealed. Adults fetched towels. The water shoved at the soil behind the hose sign and birthed an object the size of a bread box, army green, padlocked, scabbed with rust. A boy shouted, "Treasure." A man declared, "Call the city." A woman hissed, "Don't touch that." Marcella picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Addison Cole stepped forward, white dress impeccable despite Mud's intentions. "That," she said, "belongs to the WA." June's eyebrows did an eloquent thing that would have made a bishop rethink a sermon. "Does it?" Addison smiled. "Everything on common property does." Claire reached for the box. "Common property is ours. Between ownership and claim, the box belonged to gravity, it fell." The padlock surrendered like a guilty conscience, and the lid creaked open. Inside, a child's pink ballet slipper, a grocery receipt from July 2012 with a coffee ring the shape of a crescent moon, and a flash drive wrapped in a strip of floral wallpaper I recognized from the old Turner house, the one that burned the summer the cicadas came early. June exhaled the smallest prayer. Nor whispered the physician's oath to herself like a spell that worked on more than bodies. Marcella worried a ring she didn't wear in public. Claire looked around for her daughter on instinct and found only strangers. Addison lifted the flash drive between 2 fingers, pinched. "I'll take this," she said, and I felt the night's temperature change. Because secrets on Maple Crescent are never stolen. They're loaned, at interest. 2 hours later, one blue envelope lay unopened on Theo's kitchen table, next to a plate of cooling pastries. He didn't touch it. He knew ghosts on the page when he saw them. He put on a kettle, and when the whistle rose, he said softly, to me, to his empty house, to the year 2012. "I told you we were not done." On the street, the water receded, leaving mud like a signature. Above it all, in the maple with my name, I listened to 5 heartbeats wrap themselves around a memory that tasted like smoke. And far away, on a laptop lit by the theater of someone else's panic, a file named Turner-fire-footage.mp4 waited like a fuse. It takes courage to keep a street quiet. It takes money to keep it clean. It takes only 1 sentence to make it honest. I know what you buried. So do you. The morning after the flood, Maple Crescent woke to a new ritual: watching each other. Curtains shifted as if the houses had learned to breathe. Lawn mowers practiced public virtue. Joggers pretended path and purpose were the same thing. The crescent wore composure like a good blazer, slightly uncomfortable, flattering enough to justify the price. Claire called an emergency coffee. She didn't specify location. Everyone knew she meant Theo's kitchen, which is where crises here like to drink. Nor arrived first, her hair still wet from a shower that had tried and failed to rinse the night from her skin. She placed her phone screen down. She didn't need the when this one had a pulse. Marcella came with apologies and a tin of almond cookies no one could afford to eat fully. June came with a notebook and the sort of pen that makes decisions permanent. Theo poured. "We vote," he said, soft. "On whether we talk." "Unanimous," June said. "We talk." Claire opened a file folder she pretended she hadn't kept 12 years. "The Turner house," she began, and the room's air remembered. In 2012, Mrs. Turner left town to care for her sister and rented her house on the corner to a couple who arrived with suitcases, a pet snake, and a talent for making neighbors imagine their windows were eyes. They paid cash. They waved rarely. They told our their lawn would be natural, and their music would be occasional. The Turner fire started in the kitchen and licked its way up to the attic where holiday boxes dream of Decembers. It ended at the edge of the nursery with wallpaper printed in flowers that, once upon a time, had convinced a tired mother the world valued pretty over panic. On the night of the fire, these 5 were not a unit. They were neighbors tethered by location and accident. Marcella, then newly minted, had been staging an open house around the corner. Lemons, linen, a lie about the plumbing. She noticed the smell before everyone else. Paint thinner? She'd asked the empty rooms. On her drive home, she saw smoke unroll from the Turner eaves and thought, "Not my listing, thank God," and then, "God forgive me." Nor had been a junior attending in the counting the hours until dawn by the rhythm of sutures. When the scanner chirped residential fire and she heard the address, her mouth learned a new drought. She phoned dispatch, then Layla's sitter, then kept her voice steady as she told a teenage volunteer exactly how not to die of urgency. June had been awake, writing Christmas cards in July to stay ahead of a lonely winter. She smelled the smoke and called 911, then woke her husband, George, who wandered out in bare feet and stood across from the Turner house while the sirens made his old war start again. Theo had been in his backyard trying to love a grill that did not love him back. He saw Evelyn Hart, that is, me, running toward the house, and he followed because I had never run anywhere in my life without a reason and because we'd once argued for an hour about whether kindness counts if you expect thanks. It does. Claire, pre-divorce, still golden with courtroom victories, had driven home late from a client dinner. She turned onto the Crescent and into a traffic cone factory of flashing lights. She parked badly and ran. Her daughter Maddie, 8 years old and promised a new bike if she stopped borrowing the neighbors, slept through everything until the firework pop of a window giving up. 5 people with different excuses converged on one house. Inside, the kitchen burned the way kitchens burn, greedy and fast. Evelyn, that is, me, sprinted around back, where the nursery window stuck like an accusation. "No baby," I shouted, coughing. "Only boxes." I didn't add that I'd been watching. The renters had no child. The wallpaper lied. Then an engine coughed into place. The professionals arrived. Captain Ruiz barked choreography. Water argued with fire. A neighbor's garden hose wrote a brief poem about hope. In the noise, a figure slid along the side fence wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too large and gloves meant not to fit. He carried a red canister that did not say gasoline because criminals rarely labeled their props. He saw Claire. Claire saw him. He ran. She ran faster. Claire tackled him like a woman who had 3 brothers and a law degree. Nor, who had hands for emergencies, twisted away the canister. June, who owned a voice that could stop a dog at 20 paces, told the man to lie down. He did. Then he laughed. "Insurance," he panted. "Just work." Marcella stared at his boots. "Expensive, wrong for a temp." She memorized the brand. The house did not forgive human dramas. It ate air. Firefighters hauled the renter couple from a bedroom closet lined with the kind of boxes that have serial numbers. Police handcuffed the arsonist part-timer and handed Claire a form that would later become a story told at barbecues. Remember when Claire took down the firebug? The next morning, when smoke settled and the WA drafted a stern memo about flammable materials and acceptable fence heights, someone left a package on June's porch. Inside, a thumb drive and a slip of paper in a hand she didn't know yet. I saw WHO went in after the fire was out. June plugged the drive into her old laptop with the prudence of a woman who labels leftovers. The video opened on the Turner house, blackened and quiet. A timer stamped 2:31 in the corner like insomnia. A figure in a white dress and rubber boots moved through the ruined kitchen with practiced care, lifted a scorched metal tin from under the sink, and tucked it into a canvas bag. The camera angle was door-high, neighbor clever. The figure turned. Addison Cole looked at the lens the way people look at mirrors when they're choosing which face to wear. She left by the back gate an HOA president has a key for. June closed the laptop and made a choice. To sit on the truth in the belief that it would, like batter, become something kinder in the oven of time. This is how good people get in trouble. Back in Theo's kitchen in the present tense, the five watched that same footage on a newer screen. The room made the kind of silence that hurts feelings. Theo pressed pause. Addison, caught mid-stride, looked like a saint on a stained glass window commissioned by a liar. Claire rubbed her temples. "We bury a box so the WA doesn't," she said softly. "We bury it with the slipper and the receipt and that." She nodded at the flash drive. "That's what we buried," Nor said, voice clean with truth. "And now someone knows." "Someone signed J," Marcella said. "June? I'm not that messy," June said. "If I blackmail you, you'll know it's me." They considered other J's. Jordan Turner, renter. Deported years ago. Janine, Addison's assistant. Loyal to her paycheck. Jeremy Cole, Addison's husband. Accounts payable, and something about his smile always a ledger. Theo tapped the unopened blue envelope on the counter. "I think I know who Jay is," he said, and opened it. Inside, a single sentence, handwritten in the careful penmanship of someone who alphabetizes spices and grudges. "Pay by Friday. ORI tell them why Evelyn Hart never left Maple Crescent." Theo reached for a chair, it held. "You think Jay is Addison," Nor said. "I think it's Jeremy," Theo replied. "But Addie is the reason he can afford envelopes." "Why now?" Marcella asked. 12 years. "Why this week?" June leafed through her notebook. "Addison's WA term ends next month. There's a vote. The bylaws require the treasurer to submit audits annually. We haven't seen one in 3 years. If the audits surface, someone needs a distraction," Claire finished. A distraction arrived that afternoon in the form of a fire on Nor's driveway. Not big enough to call the station, but large enough to roast a message into the concrete. Tick-tock. Layla screamed and didn't pretend it was about her shoes. That evening, 3 cars idled near the abandoned Turner lot. Claire had called it a strategy session, but strategies don't leave tire marks. Nor had brought a first aid kit. Marcella had brought bolt cutters. June had brought thermoses. Theo had brought the kind of bread that suggests forgiveness. "Plan?" Claire asked. "Simple," Marcella said. "We take back the flash drive before Jay copies it. We need Addison's house keys and office keys. She leaves her purse in the kitchen during WA meetings. I know because I'm observant." "You mean you snoop," June said. "I stage," Marcella said, and no one fought that word because sometimes staging is survival. They split into teams. Claire and Theo would attend the WA meeting in the community room and keep Addison busy with a debate about whether crepe myrtles counted as trees or delinquent fireworks. Nor and June would search the WA office. Marcella would improvise. Improvisation, in Marcella's practice, meant picking a lock with a bobby pin and a prayer whispered in Spanish the nuns had sworn would work only on the truly penitent. The secretary's door sighed open. Filing cabinets sulked. A safe hid behind framed bylaws. June dropped to her knees and felt the carpet like a reader brailing plot. "Here," she said, and pried up a corner of plywood. The spare key lay where predictability puts it, under the belief that no one looks down. Nor opened the safe by accident. She is the sort of woman cabinets want to tell secrets to. Inside, WA records, a velvet pouch, and the flash drive from the flood, now copied and labeled heart in Addison's hand. The velvet pouch held rings, one wedding band too small for Addison, one signet engraved JC, sometimes trophies or just insurance policies with better lighting. June slid the copy into her purse. Nor put the rings back. When they closed the safe, a red diode blinked. The office door clicked. Addison stood in the threshold, hair perfect, smile political. Jeremy behind her with the expression of a man who sets up tripwires and calls them ethics. "Snooping?" Addison asked, silk over wire. "Staging," Marcella said from behind her, all innocence and perfume. She had arrived via the back stairs she'd once used to avoid a donor with octopus hands. "The office feels cold. Maybe a rug." "Keys," Claire said from the doorway, as if asking for salt. "We need to review tree permits. There's been confusion." Addison's smile thinned. "Everything on Maple Crescent is exactly as it should be," she said. "That's our concern," June replied and patted her purse like a purring cat. Jeremy leaned against the jamb and crossed his arms in that American way that means, "I believe the body is a lock." He looked at Theo a second too long. "Shame about Evelyn," he said conversationally. She was imaginative. Theo met his gaze with the steadiness of a man who knows what ovens do and loves them anyway. "She was," he said, and correct more often than polite. Addison dismissed them with a crisp, "Ladies," the way women dismiss other women when men are watching. As the door shut, Nor breathed out for the first time in a minute. Marcella whispered, "Phase 2? Phase 2, Claire confirmed. Find where they keep the audits. Find where they keep Jay." Outside, the Crescent looked like a set that hadn't swept after the matinee. The maple leaves clapped once when the wind told them a joke. On porches, people rehearsed their faces for the next thing. In my tree, I disturbed no birds. The dead make very good lookouts. You will ask, perhaps, what exactly they buried in 2012 besides a flash drive and a slipper. I will answer in the way the living never can. With the paragraph that hurts first and helps later. They buried a promise to tell the truth tomorrow. Tomorrow is where Maple Crescent hides its sins. It is also where it stores its courage. By Friday, Jay wanted money. By Friday, someone else wanted justice. They would both get a show. Thursday delivered storms. The kind that fling branches and apologies. The Crescent's gutters worked overtime, so did everyone's imaginations. It is difficult to keep a street polite while thunder tells it to misbehave. Claire spent the morning drafting an affidavit she hoped never to file. Habit kept her hands sharp. Fear made her keep reaching for a photo of Maddie at 8 on a bike too big, knees bandaged, grin ferocious. "I will not let our worst moment parent my future," she said to the air. discovering that sentences spoken into quiet rooms tend to come true only when overheard by trouble. At noon, Nor found a note in her mailbox. Friday. 10 p.m. The gazebo. Come alone. Cash only. J. She stood in the road and let raindrops turn the ink into a bruise. A loan is what blackmailers ask for. Together is what saves us. At 2, Marcella found out her husband's travel had been less operations, more operator. A hotel charge in a city he didn't claim. A text that arrived while he was in a meeting, yet read room 1105, doors open. Marcella deleted nothing. She filed it in a folder labeled leverage and let herself cry for exactly 3 minutes in a closet that had staged 24 homes and 0 honest lives. At 4, June visited George and read him the weather because it was what he used to love most, facts with no corners. Storm tonight, she said, smoothing his hair. We've seen worse. And better. He smiled vaguely and patted the blanket as if it were a dog that understood his jokes. At 6, Theo baked a cake he would take nowhere. Dark chocolate with a vertical seam of raspberry that looked like a heart if you cut it right. He poured tea for his memory of me and said, as if I were sitting on the other side of the table, they'll come through. They already are. By 8, the 5 were in Claire's garage with the door down and a fan loud enough to legalize their meeting. On a folding table, a map of Maple Crescent, a laptop humming with theft, a lockbox that did not yet contain cash. We don't pay, Claire said. We string, we catch, we bait, Marcella corrected. Words matter. We confess, Nor said, surprising herself. After. Not because Jay asked. Because we should have 12 years ago. June looked at her with the tenderness sharp women reserve for bravery in others. You'll make a terrible president, she said. I'll vote for you. They broke the tasks like bread. Claire would bring the cash that wasn't, paper filled with stage money and a top layer of real 20s. Nor would wire a tiny microphone under the gazebo bench, the kind you can hear guilt through. Marcella would place a tracker in whatever Jay carried. June would arrange for Officer Marquez, an old student of her substitute teacher days, to be parked coincidentally near the gazebo at 9:58. Theo would stall Addison with pastries. His cinnamon rolls were tempered into weapons of delay. While they planned, Addison held a different meeting, one she would never call a conspiracy, because that word does not match her fonts. In her living room, under a painting of a sailboat that had never touched water, she faced Jeremy and Janine. Explain the audits, she said, as if to a child. Jeremy adjusted his cuff. The WA invested our reserve fund in Asterian Partners, short-term, low-risk. The market dipped. Temporarily. How temporarily? Addison asked, voice so mild even the fern flinched. 3 years, Jeremy said. I rotated paper. By the time we host the fall gala, it'll look like a return. Will it be one? Jeremy rearranged his mouth into a shape that believed in optimism. Almost. Addison turned to Janine. And the footage? Backed up in 2 places, Janine said, proud. One on my laptop, one on the cloud. We have leverage if anyone behaves irregularly. Addison nodded. Leverage is not a verb, she said automatically, then softer. Do either of you know who's sending the letters? Janine blinked the careful blink of someone who doesn't get paid enough for plots. Jeremy looked at his shoes and said nothing, which the correct among us call an answer. When the storm loosened its throat, Maple Crescent went briefly holy. Streetlights haloed raindrops. The gazebo at the park looked like a chapel skeptical of vows. At 9:58, Norse slipped the microphone under the bench. Marcella hid behind a rhododendron that refused to accept pruning, Claire parked facing away. June texted Officer Marquez a pie emoji and 2 sirens, their code for pretend you saw nothing until it's worth seeing. And Theo placed a box of pastries on Addison's steps with a note, "For your audit meeting." Cinnamon clarifies. T. At 10:03, Jay arrived, punctual enough to be arrogant, late enough to be safe. A hood, gloves, umbrella, the walk of a man who counts his calories and his enemies. He sat. He tapped the bench like a metronome. "Cash?" he said to the shadows. Claire stepped forward. She set the lockbox on the slats as if feeding pigeons. "Proof?" she said. Jay slid an envelope across without looking at who took it. Inside, photographs from the Turner footage, printed and cruel. Addison in boots, a tin under her arm. The back gate closing. Nor's phone vibrated. The microphone was catching something, but not Jay's voice. Another channel hummed on the same frequency, bleeding into her feed like gossip into a church potluck. "We do it Friday," Jeremy was saying to Janine in Addison's living room. "The gazebo makes it look neutral. We collect, we delete, we end this." "I thought Jay was June," Janine said, and Nor nearly laughed out loud at the insult. Under the gazebo, Jay shifted. The umbrella tilted. Marcella saw the wristwatch, expensive, vulgar in the way men's mistakes often are. She texted the others, "J equals Jeremy." Claire closed the lockbox. "You'll get the rest after the audit," she said. "We want a vote. We want the books opened. We want a list of every withdrawal." "Not how this works," Jeremy said, and his voice finally dropped the act. "It is tonight," Claire said, and when he reached for the box, Marcella stepped out and took his umbrella for no reason except that she could. Jeremy lunged. June's car horn chirped exactly twice. Officer Marquez's cruiser rolled into the lot like a chaperone late to a dance. Jeremy froze, because men like him are very good at freezing when uniforms arrive. Claire lifted the lid of the lockbox to show a stack of bills and a nest of stage money. "You want to call this in?" she asked the officer sweetly. "Or would you like to start with the audits?" Marquez, who had once earned detention from June for cheating at a vocabulary quiz and had sent her flowers on the day she retired, made a face that meant paperwork. "Ma'am," he said to Claire, "I believe you have a meeting at the community room." They did. At 10:40 p.m., the WA board, alerted by text threads that never sleep, assembled in the fluorescent mercy of the community room. Residents arrived in pajamas and principals. Addison called the meeting to order with a gavel the size of a bad idea. "Emergency session," she said. "Unscheduled. Unwelcome. Transparency session," Nor corrected gently. "Necessary. Motion to review the last 3 audits," Claire said. "Second?" Half the Crescent raised hands. June counted like a bingo caller. "Carried," she said. Addison's smile did a small private thing. "We are all neighbors," she said. "Surely we can address concerns without escalating." Marcella clicked the remote. The screen behind Addison lit. Coles plus WA. Transfers 2022 to 2025. Asterian Partners. Slush disguised as slush. Jeremy's signatures like the tails of kites fleeing. Addison did not blink. "Jeremy manages investments," she said, and he. "Set up Jay," Theo said softly from the back. He held the blue envelope with his own name on it in the handwriting that matched the audits, not Addison's careful loops but Jeremy's petty insistence on straight lines. He blackmailed the street to protect a hole he dug with our money. Jeremy tried a smile. "We were making it back. By Friday," Claire said. At 10, a rustle moved through the room, the way weed acknowledges wind. People who had once waved only on trash day now whispered words like recall, forensic, vote. The Crescent was trying on a new outfit, honest. Addison stood very still in the fluorescent light. The room waited for her to break. Instead, she did something more interesting. She told the truth that made sense to her. 12 years ago, she said, I went into a burned house and removed a box of cash because the renters had been paying the owner under the table, and the owner had Alzheimer's and a son who stole from her. I took the money to keep it safe, and I used a portion of it as reserve when a storm ruined the pool house roof, and our insurance called it an act of God, and therefore not their problem. I told myself I'd tell you when the audits looked less creative. I told myself I was saving the street from embarrassment. I told myself a lot of things. Where's the rest of the cash? June asked, not angry, just tired. Addison's eyes glinted once, then leveled. Ask Jeremy, she said, and stepped away from the table as if it had snapped. And since we are in the mood, you may ask me who left the anonymous tip about Evelyn Hart the week before she died. It was me, because I believed she was blackmailing us. I was wrong about that and right about others. The room made a different silence, the kind that doesn't know what to do with sincerity. Why did Evelyn die, Addison? Theo asked, voice steady because it had to be. Do you know that truth too? Addison swallowed. I know she sent me a letter with no return address and the word call. I know I did. I know she said she was tired of being the only one who kept our secrets in her head. I know I told her to wait a week. I know she didn't. People looked at me then, in the only way the living can. By looking at where I'm not. It's a kindness, being the shape of a space. I wanted to tell them I didn't die because of a street's sins. I died because hearts are rooms with many doors, and sometimes you close the wrong one and forget where the key went. Motion, June said dryly, to suspend the coals and appoint an interim treasurer. Hands rose like a field. In the hallway, Jeremy texted Janine. White cloud now. In Janine's apartment, the power flickered, the router hiccuped, and the cloud refused to cooperate, because even the internet loves a messy meeting. Outside, the storm closed one eye. It had decided to watch. On Maple Crescent, the dead do too. It is easy to turn on a person. It is harder to turn on a habit. By Saturday morning, the Crescent had done both. Jeremy Cole was escorted out of the community room wearing indignation and a raincoat. Addison resigned before they could fire her. She wrote an email that used the word stewardship 3 times and left her gavel on the secretary's desk the way a queen lays down scepters in the last act. She did not apologize. She did something braver. She stopped pretending she had done nothing wrong. Is she the villain? Layla asked her mother over waffles. She's a neighbor, Noor said. Which means both. Claire filed the petition for a special election and turned in an envelope with cash, real, counted, earmarked for repairs ignored while magic accounting tried to pass. Marcella posted an open listing for a small shop on Main, Vega Home, and printed a sign that said rent by owner. Tomas called from a number that claimed to be Chicago and asked why their joint account was now 2. Marcella sent him a photograph of the hotel receipt and a gif of a door locking itself. June took flowers to Maple Pines and told George about the storm and the meeting and the way Maple Crescent, when pushed, remembered it had a spine. He laughed at the punchlines, which is how she knew he had heard her. The muscles remember what the mind forgets. Theo baked 6 pies and wrote 6 names on them: Claire, Noor, Marcella, June, Addison, Evelyn. He delivered 5 and left 1 on my grave under the maple that refuses to care about ordinance distances when roots like a view. The special election in the evening felt like a church raffle and a revolution. Nor won the treasurer role with an acceptance speech that included the sentence, "I will not make your money interesting." Claire took secretary because minutes are power. June refused a title and accepted all influence. Marcella volunteered for beautification because some repairs require shovels. Addison arrived late and stood at the back, dressed not white but navy, as if she had remembered the value of shadows. When the votes were counted, she started to leave, then pivoted and faced the room. "Before I become a civilian," she said, "I have something you all deserve." From her bag, she produced the tin she'd taken from the Turner house 12 years ago. It rattled with coin, clinked with truth. She set it on the table and opened it. Inside, cash in the brittle wrappers of a decade ago. A ring that did not belong to her, a folded scrap of wallpaper with a name scrawled across it that June did not recognize and Theo did, E. Hart. "Evelyn asked me to keep it," Addison said quietly. "She said if anything happened to her, I should bring it here. I failed the deadline. I don't intend to fail now." The room listened as if newly invented. Theo touched the ring with the gentleness of a man who has learned that even objects have temperatures. He knew it. I did too. It was mine. I had stashed it under the sink in a house that burned because I had the bad habit of moving treasure into the mouths of danger. That's the problem with loving secrets. You keep them where they can hear you. Nor opened the folded wallpaper. On the back, in my hand, one sentence. "If they won't tell the truth, make them sing it." "Sing what?" Claire asked the ceiling, which was not inclined to be helpful. June took out the ring and threaded it through a chain around her neck but did not keep it. "We finish what we should have started," she said. "We tell." Sunday became confession day. People came to the gazebo. We had exorcised it of blackmail, and spoke into a microphone connected to nothing except their own ears. They told small truths that had weighed large. I took the snowblower one winter. I said I liked your casserole. I was the one who complained about your wind chimes. I voted against your deck because mine isn't as nice. They told larger truths that had started wars. I didn't call when I should have. I knew and pretended not to. I loved someone dangerous and not someone good. When it was their turn, the 5 who had buried the box 12 years ago stood together. Claire went first. "I chased a man I thought was the villain," she said, "and then I stopped chasing the story. I let a lie be our fence. I am tired of lawyering my own heart. Here is the evidence. Decide for yourself. Just do it out loud." Nor spoke next, voice steady, eyes damp. "In the you learn to order tragedies. The big ones bleed, the small ones bruise. Maple Crescent had a big 1 and 12 years of bruises that we called a look. I want to practice medicine on the kind of street that brings each other ice." Marcella held the microphone like a baton. "I stage for a living. I make rooms look better than they are so buyers can imagine they will be happy there. I don't apologize for that. I apologize for doing it in my life. I want real, even when it clashes with the rug." June cleared her throat, which has always been a bell. "I chose not to show you a tape in 2012 because I thought it would protect us. Mercy badly practiced becomes harm. I know better now. I expect all of us to do better with me." Theo said nothing into the microphone. He did what he always does, fed a crowd. There are sentences butter and sugar say better than the best of us. When Addison stepped up, the Crescent tilted, ready to boo or praise. "I will be brief," she said, and was. "You were right to mistrust me. Wrong to think I didn't love this street. I crossed 3 lines. I kept cash that didn't belong to me. I let my husband manage what I should have watched, and I enjoy being necessary more than I enjoy being useful. I am resigning. I am also staying, which is to say, I will be a better neighbor than I was a president." Someone clapped. Then more hands, including some who'd hated her hydrangea memos. It is extremely suburban to applaud reform out of comfort and redemption out of recognition. That night, the Crescent smelled like rain and cinnamon. A raccoon toppled a compost bin and learned humility. Teens kissed just out of view because it is the duty of teens to be the street's future problem. Lights in kitchen windows looked like small planets figuring out gravity. In my tree, I watched the 5 women I had stitched together by dying. It is a mean way to sew, but sometimes the cloth you have is costly. I should confess a thing, too. I had not been blackmailing Maple Crescent before I died. I had been cataloging it. I had written everyone's worst-kept secret in a notebook labeled "Things We Survive." When I realized I wouldn't, I mailed a copy to Addison because I knew she valued rules enough to break them for the right reason and because I hoped she would pick a fight I was too tired to start. She did, messily. But then, this street bakes its bread with mess. Does this story end? Not really. Streets don't end, they loop. Marcella left Tomas and opened Vega Home, where she sells pillows to women who say they're only looking. She installed a bell at the door that rings like approval. She flirts with Officer Marquez, who pretends to stop in for zoning brochures. Nora runs the WA books like an ICU nurse runs a code. Sharp, clear, forgiving when she can be, unkind only to chaos. She and Layla fought about curfew and then finished a puzzle at midnight when the fight ran out of room. Claire took on fewer clients and more hours with Maddie, who, at 20 now, rides a too-fast motorcycle and texts her mother pictures of sunsets when she can't think of anything else to say. That counts. June kept her porch open, her tea hot, her expectations high. When George died in September, the whole Crescent brought chairs to the lawn and told stories until the stars remembered their own names. Addison planted native grasses and learned to like the way they go wild before they stay. She speaks less and listens more. When you pass her walking at dawn, she nods, and the nod says, "I am still here. I am learning." Theo turned the bakery lights on at 4 a.m. the next morning and every morning after. He slips a piece of cake into a brown box and leaves it under the maple every year on the day a woman he once argued with and admired stopped arguing and started narrating. As for me, I will keep my perch. I will watch sprinklers and apologies. I will eavesdrop on raccoons and committees. I will whisper to the leaves when the Crescent forgets what it promised itself. We did not unbury something perfect. We excavated the ordinary courage of people who want to live together and therefore must make a habit of telling the truth before the storm does. If you stand at the middle of Maple Crescent at dusk and listen, you can hear it. The faintest sound, not sprinkler, not cicada, not gossip, the street breathing, which means, for now, it is alive.